Okay, let's talk about one of the most famously tangled stories in all of gaming, The Legend of Zelda. For decades, fans have tried to piece together how all these different adventures in Hyrule actually connect. I mean, the story is told completely out of order, across different consoles, different generations. It's a mess. So, how did Nintendo finally connect all those dots? Well, we're going to dive in and untangle the official timeline once and for all.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the core ideas of the series. Then, we'll zero in on the one game that breaks everything. After that, we'll explore the three timelines that come from that split, figure out where the new games fit, and then, ask the big question. What does the timeline even mean for a legend like this?
All right, so before we even get into the weeds of a timeline, there's a huge concept you gotta get. Zelda isn't one continuous story about one guy. Nope, it's a cycle. It's a legend that just keeps repeating itself through the ages. And this whole cycle thing, it was actually set up in the game that's chronologically first, Skyward Sword. In that game, an ancient evil basically curses the hero and princess, saying that his hatred will follow their descendants forever.
And at the heart of that cycle, you've always got two key players who are constantly reincarnated. You've got the hero, who has the spirit of the hero, and yeah, he's pretty much always a kid named Link. Then you have the princess, who has the blood of the goddess, and she's almost always named Zelda. These two are basically destined time and time again to face down that same ancient evil.
So that was the big mystery for years, right? How do all these different Links and all these different Zeldas actually connect? For the longest time, it was all just fan theories on forums. But then, in 2011, Nintendo dropped a bombshell. They published a book called the Hyrule Historia and gave us the official answer. And it all came down to one single game. That's right, the entire sprawling chronology of The Legend of Zelda hinges on one game. If you want to make sense of any of this, you absolutely have to understand what happened in 1998's masterpiece, Ocarina of Time. And I am not exaggerating one bit. The end of this one game doesn't just, lead into the next sequel. No, it literally shatters history into pieces. Everything that happens from that point on, everything that could possibly happen, it all flows from that final epic battle between Link and the big bad himself, Ganondorf.
So the key part of the story is this. Link, our hero of time, has to pull the Master Sword and get sealed away for 7 years. He wakes up as an adult to finally take on Ganondorf. After this huge climactic fight, he and Zelda use the power of these ancient sages to seal the bad guy away. Now, in any other story, that'd be it. Roll credits. But this is Hyrule, and this one single victory, it creates a huge, fascinating problem for time itself.
And that brings us to, honestly, the coolest and maybe most confusing part of the entire legend, the Great Timeline Split. Because you see, that final battle in Ocarina of Time, it doesn't just have one outcome. It has 3.
This is the exact moment where history stops moving in a straight line and just fractures. It shatters. That one single fight between Link and Ganondorf spins off into 3 totally separate parallel universes, each one with its own history, its own set of games, and its own unique fate for the entire Kingdom of Hyrule.
And this table here lays it all out perfectly. You've got 3 branches. First, there's the big what-if scenario. What if Link actually lost the fight? Well, that gives us the Fallen Hero timeline. Super dark. Then you have the 2 timelines where he wins. In one, we follow the future that he saved, but then had to leave behind. That's the adult timeline. And in the other, we follow Link himself as he's sent back to his childhood to try and prevent the whole mess from happening in the first place. That's the child timeline.
Okay, so let's actually dig into these 3 separate futures. It's pretty wild because each one has a completely different vibe, and of course is home to some of the absolute best games in the whole series.
First up, let's talk about the darkest timeline. This is the one where the unthinkable happens. Against all odds, the hero of time fails. Ganon wins. It's over. So in this reality, Ganondorf gets his hands on the complete Triforce and transforms into the pure evil Demon King Ganon. Hyrule is just plunged into darkness. As a last-ditch effort, the sages manage to seal him and the corrupted sacred realm away, but the damage is already done. This whole timeline is just about a constant, desperate fight against an evil that already won.
And this whole what-if scenario was actually a pretty genius move by Nintendo. It was the perfect way for them to place all the classic games. We're talking the original Legend of Zelda from '86, A Link to the Past, into the timeline. It makes perfect sense. In those games, a new hero has to show up because, well, the legendary hero of time was defeated centuries ago.
All right, now let's move on to a timeline where Link actually succeeded. So after he beats Ganon, Zelda plays the Ocarina of Time and sends Link right back to where he started, to give him a chance to live out the childhood that was basically stolen from him.
Now, because Link comes back knowing everything that's about to happen, he's able to warn the royal family, and they stop Ganondorf's evil plan before it even gets started. But this doesn't magically create a perfect, peaceful world. Instead of being sealed in the Sacred Realm, Ganondorf gets captured and sentenced to be executed. But that fails spectacularly. So he gets banished to this creepy shadow dimension called the Twilight Realm, which basically just plants the seeds for a whole new kind of nightmare down the road.
So this timeline kicks off right after Ocarina, following that same young hero on his very personal, very weird quest in Majora's Mask. Fast forward a few centuries, and Ganondorf's simmering hatred is enough for him to find a way out of his prison, which leads directly to that dark, shadowy invasion you see in Twilight Princess.
And that leaves us with the third and final path. Now this one is really interesting. This is the future that the hero of time saved, but then immediately vanished from, because he was sent back in time. This is a world left without its hero.
So the big problem here is pretty obvious. With no hero around to protect the kingdom, when Ganon eventually breaks out of his seal, there's nobody there to stop him. The people pray for their legendary hero to return, but he never comes. So the gods are forced to make a terrible, drastic choice. They flood the entire kingdom of Hyrule, burying Ganon and the old world beneath a giant ocean. And this, of course, leads us to the beautiful, cel-shaded world of the Wind Waker and its sequels. All the adventures here happen out on the Great Sea, on little islands that are actually the tippy tops of old Hyrule's mountains. It's all about a new hero having to rise up in a world that lost its legendary one. It's a future built literally on the ruins of a drowned past.
Okay, so that brings us to the million-dollar question every Zelda fan is asking these days. Where in the world do Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom fit into this super complex three-way timeline?
Well, the first thing you have to wrap your head around is just the insane amount of time that's passed. These new games take place way in the future. We're talking over 10,000 years after any of the other games. They're so far down the line that the events of those old timelines, they've all just faded into myth. It's like trying to figure out if King Arthur was real. At this point, the specific branch just doesn't even matter anymore.
And here's the kicker. The developers have basically said this was totally on purpose. The series director, Egio Onuma, has said that history in Hyrule can change. By setting these games so incredibly far in the future, they basically gave themselves a clean slate. It's a world where bits and pieces from all three timelines can pop up as ancient legends. You see the Rito from the adult timeline and places from the child timeline, it's all just myth now. They've essentially said that where it fits, well, that's up to your imagination. And really, that brings us to the most important point of all. Maybe trying to cram every single one of these stories into one strict, rigid timeline kind of misses the whole point. This isn't a history textbook, it's the Legend of Zelda. It's a story that's meant to be retold and reinterpreted over and over again. Its real power isn't in some unchanging chain of events, but in all the different ways the legend gets told. So I guess the question I'll leave you with is this. What's really more important, the timeline or the legend itself?